Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Your Number One Fan podcast. I'm your host, Kim Spencer, your number one fan. Episode topics will vary with the ultimate goal of providing the inspiration, encouragement, and tools for you to create your most authentic, happy life. I want this to be your weekly comfort podcast that also gives you a little kick in the butt to live your life to the fullest and not care what anybody says. Thank you for being here. Now let's get into the good stuff. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Your Number One Fan podcast. Today I have Carolyn with me, and we have been friends for a while. We worked together twice in two different jobs.
Twice.
And she's just been a great person to work with, a great friend. So I'm excited to get more deep into some things having to do with mental health. This podcast is all about getting more in tune with yourself, learning more about yourself, finding confidence. And a huge part of living your best life is understanding your mental health and taking care of your mental health. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of stigma around it, and it still feels a little scary to talk about it on a podcast, and for me at least. So unfortunately, that's the case. So I think it makes it even more important to talk about it. So I will let Carolyn kind of give the listeners a little bit of background on who you are and kind of your journey right now with mental health, where you are right now, and then we'll kind of get into more of it. So go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Carolyn, and I am a elementary special education teacher. And I just recently, in the past 3 or so years, I would say I really started noticing that maybe my brain was a little bit different in the way that it reacted to things. And that started with misophonia, which is not a very common thing that you hear. I think it's becoming much more common. But basically, misophonia is a neuropsychological disorder where when you hear certain noises, your brain automatically goes into fight or flight mode. So for me, those noises are chewing noises. Like if I can hear someone chewing, like the saliva mixing in their mouth, cannot take it. My body is like, I need to get out immediately. So that's what I kind of started my therapy journey with. And then upon more further research on misophonia, because there isn't a lot of knowledge about misophonia out there. It's becoming a much more popular thing that people are starting to research. So I did my own kind of research on that, and I found out it was kind of tied into OCD and anxiety and depression. And so I started therapy for misophonia and how to react in situations where I'm feeling like I'm in the fight or flight mode. And then I started also seeing a psychiatrist, where I was then diagnosed with OCD, anxiety, and depression. And then I started a med journey on that. So in the past year, I've tried about 3 different meds, and I feel like I finally found a mixture that is really working for me. But until I found that mixture, there was some rough times in there where, the meds weren't working for me. I felt like I was legitimately crazy. I felt like people were reacting to me like I was crazy. And it was just like, it was a rough journey to get there. So,
yeah.
But I'm happy I'm there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to see you smiling and willing to talk about it. And I just want to thank you for sharing it, because it will impact at least one person, either by just your honesty about talking about it, or maybe somebody has these feelings that they don't know what they are, and it does sound like an OCD type of thing. Like, I personally don't have OCD, and I guess maybe we can kind of bond over this. Like, I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I haven't really gotten too much into it on the podcast at all, but there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much, it's almost like having a mental illness is like a trendy thing. And it's especially on TikTok. I'm always all over TikTok. So I get all these ADHD, OCD, bipolar, anxiety things. And either it's just misunderstanding it, or almost like it's a cool thing to have. I don't know how to explain it, but
I think it's becoming more like of a like I agree, like it's kind of like trendy, but I also think that there's two sides to that. Like that I think there's a lot more people coming out with their diagnoses,
Right.
and I don't think that that really happened before. So
Yeah.
I think it is creating a platform where people are more open to share their diagnoses, but at the same time, there are people that are probably like hopping on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
As much as like I don't want to say that, I do think that's what's happening. But I do think that TikTok in that way was really helpful to me because I I have had misophonia since I was about 12 years old. I have not met a single person in my life who also shared that.
Yeah.
And so I felt really alone. I felt like no one understood, like my family didn't understand what was going on. No, like none of my friends or peers really understood what it was. Um, until I started seeing TikToks about it. And like my family members and my friends would send me TikToks about it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not the only one out there. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not crazy. Like,
Mhm.
there's actually other people out
Yeah.
there that have misophonia and like they can't handle
Mhm.
noises like this. And so TikTok actually kind of made me feel a little bit like less alone in that. But I do also think that, OCD looks one way to a lot of people where it's like having to touch a doorknob like 18 times. And I do think that there's a lot of misconceptions with OCD when
Yeah.
it comes to things like that because I don't have that type of OCD.
Mhm.
The closest thing I have to that is like I can't lock the door to my house if my dog is in there because of my intrusive thoughts that come in. I think as soon as I lock the door, there's going to be a fire and he's not going to be able to get out and
Mhm.
he's the love of my life. So like I can't lock
Yeah.
I can't lock the door to my
Yeah.
house if my dog is inside. But my OCD is more like the intrusive thoughts and it's not so much physical, it's more mental.
Mhm.
So I originally started therapy and I was telling my therapist that like I didn't know if I was a good person or not because every action that I take, um, there's like there's two sides to my brain and it's almost like the devil and the angel. And so anything I do, I can say like, well, I did this for this. And then like the two sides of my brain, like for example, if I open the door for someone, like I'm just doing it to be nice. But then like the other side of my brain will be like, well, you're doing that so that other people think that you're nice, but like you're not actually that. Like my brain is always battling with
Yeah.
each other. And so that's actually a symptom of OCD is like there's a moral OCD. And so I had no idea about that until, I started my therapy journey that like that's actually the two sides of my brain is actually OCD rather
Mhm.
than like anxiety or depression.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, there's so much out there and you can feel so isolated not knowing what's going on or like just the way that you explain that I feel like maybe you didn't even think something was wrong like maybe you kind of just thought that's how other people thought or maybe you thought
Yeah,
like you know what I mean yeah so yeah and I feel that too because I've had anxiety for a long time and back to like what you said about TikTok, you're right. Like there are two sides to it for sure. And I think it's with like anything. Like everybody thinks that all of these people these days or like people our age are like woke, quote unquote. Like they're like, oh, all this stuff is just coming. It's like, no, we have this platform now and like social media where people are coming out and talking about these things. So it seems more prevalent or it seems like we care more now, but like it's just we're having these conversations that either we couldn't have or just didn't have before. And yeah, it definitely is really helpful. I mean, we're doing it right now using social media and like a podcast to
right.
talk about it. So it is helpful for sure. And anybody who's listening who's like, okay, well, I might have these thoughts. Like when you went to the therapist, first of all, did you find a therapist you liked right away? Did you get the diagnosis right away? Or was that kind of difficult to get with anybody you saw? Because I know that it's hard to find a therapist that you click with and, you
Yeah.
know,
So I actually didn't find a therapist myself. I what kind of prompted all of this is that I was at Thanksgiving dinner with my family and there was a lot of chewing involved. And since my body was in fight or flight mode, um, I kind of freaked out at my
Mhm.
family. And like I was just when I'm in fight or flight mode and I can't get out, I get like really, really irritable. And so at that Thanksgiving dinner, I was really irritable. And then the next night we had a Thanksgiving dinner and I just didn't go because I couldn't do that again.
Yeah.
And so my grandma called me and she found me some audiologists to go to because since there wasn't a lot of information about misophonia, like they didn't know if it was like a hearing thing, which audiologists do deal with some misophonia. So I went to some audiologists and they diagnosed me with misophonia, and then they explained that it's like a neuropsychological disorder. And then they gave me some more steps to take. But in that time, my grandma was also looking for therapists for me to like deal with the mentality of being in the fight or flight mode. So she gave me a few options for therapists. And so shout out to my grandma for doing all
I was
this
gonna
because
say that. Yeah, wow.
um and which is also something I think that we could touch on is the family support
Hmm.
because
For sure.
I did not have a lot of support other than my
Mhm.
grandma.
Okay.
And so she gave me some therapists. I reached out to a few of the therapists. Only one actually had openings. And the first time I called her was like right after, like a week or two after the Thanksgiving stuff. And I just started crying and explaining everything to her. And I do really like her. She's a little more, like I like a little bit of tough love and she's very soft, but I can
Okay.
also appreciate that. But I do really like her, and she's been we started EMDR therapy
Yeah.
for trauma, and
Mhm.
so I've been going through that, which has been hard, but I also like it at the same time. And then I actually found a psychiatrist on my own. Again, I had another episode at work where I was stuck in a room with people who were eating and I wasn't allowed to leave because we were grading tests and things like that. And one of my coworkers saw how like upset I was. Like I wasn't outwardly upset, but I
Mhm.
was like kind of keeping it all inside and she could kind of see it. And so she recommended her psychiatrist that she goes to. And so I started seeing that psychiatrist, and she's actually been really great. And she's the one who also diagnosed me with OCD and officially diagnosed me with anxiety and depression, which I didn't even know I had depression.
Mhm.
I went to her for the first time and I was explaining like my thoughts, and she was like, "Yeah, that's those are all depressive thoughts." And I thought I was I thought I was like I don't know, just going through life normally, but turns out I was just depressed this whole time, and I genuinely had no idea. Like my picture of depression is like you can't get out of bed, and I think that
Right. Right.
that's something that needs to be a little bit brought to the light too, is that there's many ways to go about your life with anxiety and depression and
Yeah.
things like that. So that's kind of how the therapy journey
Mhm.
has started for me.
Yeah. Shout out to your grandma.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for her. Yeah, that's actually not as common. I feel like people that are older feeling like they can help or want to help or even like believe it. I don't know. Maybe that's
Yeah.
just my experience, but I feel almost embarrassed to talk about it in certain groups because I'm like, they probably think that I'm just looking for attention or that like it's really not that serious. You know what I mean? But again, it's like, is that me just telling myself that? So yeah, I think
And I think that
anxiety.
there's like a generational,
Yeah.
like how we were it ties into like the TikTok thing. Like I feel like everyone's kind of open about it now, but I also think that we're open about it because, you know, I think that bipolar and OCD and anxiety and depression have been in us this whole time,
Hmm.
but our parents and I feel like our grandparents never took the steps to go to therapy, or
Hmm.
like when I was younger and I was explaining anxiety to my mom, she was like, "You're just stressed. Like everyone feels like that. Like you're just stressed."
Yeah.
And no, like some people, like I can tell
Mhm.
the difference between when I'm just stressed and when I like actually have anxiety. Like there's a difference to me.
Yeah, for sure.
And also like with like the depression, I I was sitting at dinner one time and like my mom was explaining all of these feelings that she's been having, and my brother was like, "Well, it sounds like you're depressed." and she had like a very extreme reaction to that. And she was like, I don't have a mental disorder, and like started going off. And I just think that, uh, I think that that's very common for